of rain and hill fog continuing across northern parts of England, but there is going to be plenty of sunshine on offer for the southern half of the UK through Tuesday and Wednesday. Perhaps that sunshine a little hazier by the time we get to Thursday, but temperatures are on the rise as we go to the end of the week.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of March, and this is the weekend on GB News. Thank you so much for your company today. Really appreciate it, as always. Now, your main stories this hour. It's an incredibly busy day as world leaders gather in London to discuss security on the European continent. It comes as Keir Starmer says a 3-part peace plan for Ukraine needs the backing of the United States. Just what can we expect from the crucial summit this afternoon? And it is, of course, following those shocking scenes from the Oval Office on Friday, and reports now suggest that Donald Trump is demanding an apology from Zelensky over that very public spat as the Ukrainian president gears up to meet King Charles later today. I'm asking, how much of a bridge will the United Kingdom be between those two nations? And elsewhere, I'll be joined by a farmer as protesters planning to join the Pancake Day rally on Tuesday are warned they could be arrested if they bring their tractors to central London. Organisers say the event will be bigger and better than the previous 2 demonstrations, though. I'm Dawn Newsome, and this is The Weekend. So thank you very much for joining me this very busy Sunday lunchtime. Really appreciate your company. We've got an absolute packed show for you, so you don't want to move a muscle, apart from maybe putting a cup of tea on in the ad breaks. It really is packed. We are bringing you loads of live breaking news, so you don't want to move. OK, and because this story is actually all about you and what you think about what we're talking about today, and anything you have a chat about, to be honest with you. And it's really easy to get involved at gbnews.com/your say and join in what we're talking about today. Fantastic panel for you. They're already keeping me on my toes. Political commentator Jonathan Liss and former special advisor Charlie Rowley. Thank you very much for joining me. More of them later, and they've got some really good stuff for you too. But before we get stuck into today's stories, let's get the news headlines with the lovely Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. It's just after 1 o'clock. The top story this lunchtime, well, we start with a catch-up on what's been going on today as we gear up for this afternoon's Summit of European Leaders in London. Let's take you live now to central London, where more world leaders are expected to arrive shortly for that summit on Ukraine. The Prime Minister is already inside after welcoming French President Emmanuel Macron, and they are joining European allies to show solidarity with Ukraine as tensions between Kyiv and Washington are still dominating. Talks will also focus on strengthening European defence and rebuilding transatlantic ties. Well, ahead of that summit, Italy's Prime Minister has warned the West must avoid division. Giorgia Meloni said the UK and Italy could and should play a key role in building bridges as she proposed talks between the US and European leaders. She was welcomed to Downing Street by Sir Keir Starmer earlier, who said both countries share a similar mindset on supporting Ukraine. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, was outside Downing Street for us when Meloni arrived.
Moving quite quickly here. Giorgia Meloni is behind me in Downing Street. The action moves this afternoon to Lancaster House. 16 world leaders mainly from Europe gathering there, with also those from Turkey, Canada, and the President of the European Commission and the European Council. The biggest peace conference of this note since the Second World War.
Today's summit follows extraordinary scenes at the White House on Friday, where Donald Trump clashed with Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him to strike a deal with Russia, or he said the US are out. Dame Priti Patel says the UK's relationship with the US remains firm, but she has condemned those scenes in Washington.
Those scenes on Friday in the White House were awful. They were absolutely awful. And, you know, I genuinely say this, when we look at President Zelensky, we feel a great deal of respect towards him because of the way in which he's conducted himself over the 3 years of this appalling illegal conflict and the barbarism of Russia, which he and his people, his country, has stood up to. And that's why we will always stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
Turning to other news this lunchtime, and train fares are set to go up, and so is the pressure on commuters already battling record cancellations. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. Campaigners are warning it will just pile further misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. The Transport Secretary says she knows passengers are frustrated, but insists the government's cap has kept the increase below average earnings growth. Next, the latest from the Middle East, where Israel has this morning blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza after the first phase of a ceasefire with Hamas expired. It follows the group rejecting a US proposal to extend the truce by 6 weeks in return for the release of hostages. Israel's Prime Minister says there will now be further consequences unless the group changes its position. Hamas, though, has accused Israel of blackmail and called on mediators to intervene. Talks on a second phase of that ceasefire deal, including more hostage releases, have barely begun. Pope Francis remains in a stable condition after suffering a breathing crisis over the weekend as he battles double pneumonia. In hospital now for the 17th day. The Vatican says the 88-year-old had a peaceful night, though, and is receiving treatment to help him breathe. He was admitted to hospital on the 14th of February with a severe respiratory infection that led to further complications. We are expecting a full medical update later this afternoon. And last night's Brit Awards went, well, brat, apparently, as Charlie XCX dominated, scooping 5 trophies. Here's the moment she claimed one of the top honours.
Charlie XCX! I'm living proof that maybe it takes a long time, but you don't need to compromise. If you believe in yourself enough, and honestly, if you make good enough music, people will resonate with you and be right there with you.
She won Song of the Year and Album of the Year. She was also named Songwriter of the Year and won Best Dance Act. Ezra Collective, Sam Fender and Stormzy were also among the other big British winners. Well, that's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in half an hour, and next we can hand you straight back to Dawn, who I've also heard is very brat.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Right, OK, let's get straight into today's show, because it is a very busy one with loads of live breaking news for you. Now, it is crunch time for Ukraine as European leaders gather in London for a special defence summit. Sir Keir Starmer has reiterated his unwavering support for Zelensky this weekend after his disastrous meeting with Donald Trump. I think that's one way of putting it, isn't it? It comes as the Prime Minister reveals he and Macron have agreed to work on their own peace plan for Ukraine in order to build bridges. OK, well, let's delve down into this one with our panel. First of all, I'm joined in the studio by political commentator Jonathan Liss, a former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, Alan Mendoza. So many men, so little time, as I like to say, on a Sunday afternoon. But I'll make an effort. OK, let's come to you first, Alan. I mean, you're the Henry Jackson Society. You analyse and research domestic and foreign policy ideas, don't you?
Try to.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly with regard to Russia and what's going on in Russia at the moment. Now, we've talked until we're pretty much blue in the face about Friday's meeting between our Zelensky and Trump and J.D. Vance. From the Russian perspective, how do you think Putin would have been analysing what was going on there?
Well, I mean, I think we got a clear sense of what the Putin regime thought by various tweets and other pronouncements coming out from Putin henchmen.
From him at all, have we?
No, because he doesn't need to say anything. The reality is that Putin's voice is being amplified by other people in his circle. They're obviously delighted by the mess of Friday. It's, kind of confirmed that they are onto a winner by their current strategy. And Putin's best point of view is to just stay silent right now. He doesn't need to inflame anything. He can see everyone fighting and trying to work it out. Now, we may hear from him once today's summit is over, and once we know what's come out of it, because then he may have a platform from which he would like to say something. But right now, he's allowing, the West essentially to fight among itself, and that's the problem.
Which brings us neatly on to what is going on this afternoon. Obviously, we have got the world leaders meeting there, Europe as well as our Canada and Turkey. 18 leaders in total at Lancaster House today, being headed up by Keir Starmer. What can we expect there? What do they hope to get out of it?
Well, firstly, there's going to be obviously an attempt at unity. That's the most important part here. Everyone's come into that meeting, whether it's Giorgia Meloni or Macron or Starmer. They've all come in saying, basically, we are united. A, we want to show our continued support for Ukraine, but B, we want to show that we are collectively on the path to peace. I mean, that is quite important to note, that people are talking about wanting to get to peace now. That's something that wasn't the case, say, 4 or 5 months ago.
I'm going to come back to you later on that point, Alan, because I just want to make there is a difference between peace and ending a war, and I think that's the point I keep coming back to. But I think we can actually cross now live to GB News political editor Christopher Hope, who is on Downing Street for us with more. Actually, not on Downing Street, at Lancaster House. There, Chris, thank you very much for managing to get to us this afternoon. Chris, what is going on? How many of the leaders are turning up there, and how long can we expect it to go on for, and what are we expecting to get out of it?
Hi Dawn, yeah, welcome to the central London location. We can't say exactly where we are, but you'll see behind me there, securing our future. They've got this branding of this major event here. It's the biggest peace conference about the future of Europe, many say, since the Second World War. A big moment. I'm ticking off the leaders as they arrive. We're expecting 16 leaders, plus the leaders of the European Commission and the Council of Europe. So far I've ticked off France's President Macron, Poland's Donald Tusk arriving with what looked like a broken leg, hobbling in, and also there's NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. It's a very, very big day here. We heard earlier from Sir Keir Starmer, the UK government is trying to lead the establishment, what they're calling here a coalition of the willing, set up by the UK and France. It sounds to me like a peacekeeping force of some sort in Ukraine to enforce the peace. We also need, as a country, according to what Sir Keir Starmer said earlier, is a US backstop. That means radar support, that means fast jets, looking over the European force on the ground. The badging of that force isn't clear. Russia say they won't accept NATO troops in Ukraine, NATO badge troops. It can't be European Union. That won't be acceptable, I think, to the UK. So it might be the creation of a whole new idea of a European border force patrolling that eastern flank with Russia. A lot is changing very quickly here, and it's all happening here. And do stay tuned on GB News all day.
Do we know roughly how long this is going to go on for, Chris? I mean, these things are going for hours.
Oh, yeah. They can do. We're expecting it to break up around 4 o'clock and then a press conference involving the Prime Minister later. That'll also be live on GB News. So we're expecting that to happen. I think all the individual world leaders will go off into other parts of London and speak to their own domestic audiences. I think that we'll just have the PM on his own. We saw him welcoming Mark Rutte and also Donald Tusk moments ago, and he's on duty here receiving. The big issue here is how can they win back the support of the US? How can they present a united front to the US saying we will enforce this peace if we have to, but we need your support to a backstop to stop Russia invading again. The big concern we heard from Sir Keir Starmer when I was with him in Washington DC is what will stop Russia coming again. They might agree some form of peace deal, but what will stop them? Currently Donald Trump is saying that the idea of US companies mining for rare earth minerals in Ukraine will be enough to stop Russia coming again. I mean, some would say having some US miners and mining companies in a sovereign country isn't enough really to stop someone like Russia who may want to invade and increase its territory. So they want to have that protection before a deal can be done. That's where the dispute is now. We think Zelensky is here too, and from here he's going to Sandringham where he meets with the king, and this is all kind of in a way performative to show to Donald Trump the world is uniting around Zelensky. Perhaps you can come back on board too. But of course, there's suggestions overnight that Zelensky himself may have to apologise, eat some humble pie after that extraordinary row, that bust-up in the Oval Office on Friday night.
OK, Chris, thank you very much. We will be coming back to you live as and when to get the updates. We're back now. Back to the panel on this one. Alan, back to that comment about getting peace. Isn't that difficult? Ending the war is the difficult thing here because, you know, every time we speak to any of the politicians from Ukraine or any of the Ukrainians themselves on the ground, they say, yeah, this is fine. You can sit in your lovely room over there. You can all come up with some wonderful agreement and Russia might even agree to it. But there's no guarantee going forward that they're going to stick to it.
Well, that's why the deal, as everyone is hung up on, has to focus around some security guarantees to make sure that Russia does stick to it. I mean, it does seem apparent now that everyone, including President Zelensky, recognises there is an opportunity to end the war. On what terms is the key moment here, and you know, how much will Ukraine have to give up, you know, unfairly, let's be honest about it, to a Russian aggressor in order to preserve itself going forwards and to secure the peace going forwards. Now, it's quite clear that US security guarantees are needed on top of whatever the Europeans can provide, and I'm sure that, you know, there is room for negotiation on that part.
Can we do this without America? I mean, America aren't at the table at the moment. I mean, we had Elon Musk tweeting overnight about America getting out of NATO. We don't need to be in NATO. Europe on its own, can we protect the Ukraine?
Well, Europe can put force on the ground, but the reality is the European force going to deter Putin? A lot of this is about deterrence going forward. It's the idea that the next time he comes, he'll think twice because the Americans, who are the big military dog, they're the ones who are actually underpinning this. Europeans are some way off, as we know, on their defence spending to be able to, you know, sort of be able to preserve and promote the idea that they can be an effective deterrent. So in reality, we do need the US beyond, the illusionary part, because there is a reality to US military presence that the Europeans at present do not have. Now, if they come out this conference to say we've all decided to spend 5% of GDP on defence, well, then you've got a European military deterrent. Until that point, we're going to need the US.
There is already debate on that. I mean, even though Macron was out in America going, yes, we are going to increase GDP, when he goes back home, the Parliament, who is not actually in control of the moment, go, no, we're not.
Well,
and France, Spain and Italy, none of those countries are agreeing on increasing their national defence spending.
Well, there's the reality, isn't it? So Europe has to decide amongst itself today, where are we? Who are we? Are we really going to sit there and be reliant always on the US, or are we going to step up, take the morally right point of view, which is to spend money on our own defence rather than expecting someone else to cover it?
Right, OK, well, let's bring the panel on this one. Charlie, coming to you first. I mean, you used to be a government advisor to Michael Gove. I wouldn't want to be a politician in there at the moment because, I mean, they are going to be, to a certain extent, not agreeing with anything any of them say, are they?
Well, I think it's moments like this where politicians really sort of, show their true colours and show their strengths and show their abilities, because this is such a fast-moving chain of events since what we saw in the Oval Office on Friday night. Usually things, when you have big summits like this, it's all a done deal through behind closed corridors and everything.
Behind closed doors,
and it's just a presentation. It's also very nice to see you and, yes, photo ops and all the rest of it. But this is different because I think there'll be a lot of inward-looking. Every European nation, including the UK, has to ask itself, has it done enough up until this point? Boris Johnson, for whatever you think about the political things, but Boris Johnson, I think, was probably the most pro-Ukrainian supporting of the Prime Ministers. That was, encouraging Rishi Sunak to give Ukraine what it needed to try and stop the war, to finish it earlier, to win, because that's the point we're now talking about. As Alan absolutely rightly said, to end the war, there's going to have to be some sort of compromise and give and take, which means that there'll be a winner and probably a loser. But the winners overall should be the people of both countries, where the killing and the killing of both sides comes to an end. But we've got a room full of European leaders who are politicians. They're dealing with an American president that is a businessman. And he is seeing it through the prism of business and getting a deal, and obviously showed President Zelensky the door because the deal clearly couldn't have been done because of whatever for all the reasons that we know about that we saw. So I think it is a difficult one, but ultimately it's about results. The EU and the European leaders have either got to stump up the cash for defence spending, they've either got to stump up military support if they want the war to continue, if they want Ukraine to win. Do we want more killing and bloodshed? I don't think anybody wants that. So this is the discussions that they've got to have.
This is the ultimate prize, is to stop people losing their lives, isn't it? But, I mean, and Jonathan, they're having this meeting there, but the aggressors aren't there. America aren't there. And they're the two important players in this. And as we keep coming, this very good point by Charlie there, Donald Trump is a businessman. He's not a politician. And I got the impression, almost watching on Friday, it was almost like a reality show, like TV. As he said himself, this makes good TV.
Yeah, well, he's a profoundly transactional person with not a single ounce of morality in his entire body. So, of course, that he will do what is in his interest, first of all, and then perhaps as a secondary concern, what he thinks might be in the United States' interest. But I wouldn't count on that, to be honest. But we have to work with the situation that we have. Clearly, Ukraine is in a difficult and weak position, particularly after what happened on Friday. And so if we now not only discount the possibility that the United States is an ally, but actually contemplate the very, very difficult idea that the United States might actually be a de facto adversary. Not the people of the United States, but the United States government is now taking an explicitly pro-Russia line at the United Nations, voting against resolutions that sort of acknowledge that Russia actually invaded Ukraine. No government minister in the United States is now saying that Russia actually invaded the Ukraine, which is just a statement of fact. It does not a value judgment. That is what happened.
happened. You won't hear Trump say that. You won't hear Trump call Putin the aggressor. You kind of had Trump complaining that Zelensky was whinging about Putin, the man that has sort of decimated his country. I mean, this is just completely obscene. And it's just incredibly demoralising that so few Republicans are prepared to say so, by the way, because, you know, this is the party of Reagan. This is the party of, you know, the United States in the Cold War. And, you know, to think what that generation of leaders, you know, obviously I disliked in many ways, and, yeah, so under George W. Bush, but the party of George W. Bush and Reagan is no longer the Republican Party. The party that was always suspicious of Russia, with reason, is now sort of in bed with Russia because Trump is an authoritarian, and as people are pointing out, he wants to run a country that looks more like Russia than the United States. So, look, this is the situation that we have.
Just bring Alan on that particular point. I mean, you've just accused Trump of wanting to run America in the same way as Putin runs Russia.
Absolutely, 100%. I don't think there's a debate to be had about that.
Well, I think Trump has some affection for that model. I think that's quite clear in terms of how he likes to present himself, how he likes to carry out government, how he likes people around him. And even I read a very interesting point about Garry Kasparov today about Elon Musk's presence. Elon Musk, he says, is acting very much like a Russian oligarch traditionally. He's got no formal position of any real note. I mean, this Doge thing is a made-up position, essentially. But his power and influence derives from his proximity to the president. Now, that's a very Russian model of how to do things. Now, I don't think Trump is there to subvert American democracy. I don't believe that. I think he wants to get things done, and his view of how to get things done is entirely transactional. He doesn't care so much for systems. He wants action and results. The problem is that the way he's going about it, I think, is going to alienate a lot of people in America, let alone anywhere else. And he may well find that will be counterproductive to his aim of getting those results.
What is the best result for America and Trump?
What, in the Ukraine war? Well, obviously, they would like to be, or Trump would like to be the guy who brings peace to Ukraine. He wants to see that over. But I have to say, I'm not sure, you know, what the map looks like matters to him, per se. He wants the end of conflict. He doesn't want conflict to restart. That is important. And if the one thing we haven't factored in, people are always saying right now, oh, Putin, you know, he's sitting happy. Putin hasn't entered the negotiating room yet either. I'm quite convinced that despite the friendliness, quite rightly, that Jonathan's, you know, pointed out is being shown towards Putin in words and language, when they get to that negotiating table, if Putin puts up resistance to whatever Trump might decide is his view, Trump will come down on him as hard as he's come down on Zelensky.
I don't think he'd ever do that.
No, I'm just going to bring Charlie back in on this one. I think that's an interesting point, because Trump at the moment, as you said, Alan, is playing nicely and talking to, well, not Zelensky so much, but with Putin. But if Putin doesn't play the game, a bit like Zelensky wasn't willing to do on that Friday, do you think he will turn and treat Putin like he treated Zelensky?
I think he might. I think he would, because I think he's you know, again, it's all transactional. We've used that word about 3 times, because it is a businessman. And I think, you know, I don't know enough about the, you know, the internal workings of Russia, but I don't believe they're as strong as what, you know, they certainly make out to be. There was an attempted coup a couple of years ago, and, you know, everybody was running around like
they couldn't even. They marched to Kiev and then marched back. I mean, they thought they'd take Ukraine in sort of 2 weeks, 3 days was what we heard. Obviously, you know, 3 years later, they have 1/5 of the country.
Exactly, and Trump knows that. And, you know, to coin his phrase, I think Donald Trump has got all the cards. And so if Putin does try any sort of funny business behind the scenes and tries to sort of renege on something that they probably might have agreed behind closed doors, they can probably get on better with each other because they know how each other work. They're both quite strong, powerful leaders. They probably respect strengths in each other. They're both 2 tough guys that like to be around tough guys.
But this is exactly the point, Charlie, because Trump does respect strength, and he respects authoritarianism, and he's also a bully. Like, we can't discount basic human faculties and features here. He's a bully. What do bullies do? They kick down. They pick on people they think are weaker than them to make themselves feel strong. That is why Trump wouldn't give sort of Starmer or Macron, dressing down, even Starmer and Macron were being incredibly sort of sycophantic towards Trump, you know, in clever diplomatic ways. I'm not sort of questioning their strategy in approaching Trump, but they knew they had to flatter Trump even while sort of putting their own positions across.
But let me give you an example of where Trump has already shown that despite his loving of authoritarians and, you know, tough guys, he's prepared to do the right thing when it's in his interest. Kim Jong-un, North Korea. Now, you'll remember in term 1 of Trump, he went out of his way to praise him, to say, we're going to do this amazing deal, it's going to be fantastic. He even went there, crosses the line, all the rest of it. And then when they come to the second key meeting, meeting and Kim Jong-un turns out to be an unreliable negotiating partner, what does Trump do? He doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, I'm done with this guy. I'm out. Goodbye.
Well, Kim Jong-un is not on this level of strength as other people. He doesn't need. He's not. Kim Jong-un is a much weaker leader.
He's supplying Putin half his weapons.
Oh, sure, but Kim Jong-un is a much weaker leader than sort of Macron or Starmer. He's not. In North Korea is not sort of global, world-leading nation. Yeah, of course it's an important country also with a nuclear weaponry. But I don't think the analogy quite holds. The point is that Trump is not going to give Putin a dressing down. He wouldn't dare treat Putin the way he treated Zelensky on Friday. And so...
But just on that point, because I think we've got to, again, sort of just roll back a little bit. I mean, look, Donald Trump can speak for himself. He speaks plenty of times. But I don't think he went into that meeting to dress down Zelensky. I don't think anybody...
You don't subscribe
Some people think it was a trap. A lot of people think it was a trap.
It wasn't. And those conspiracy theories...
Well, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just a speculation. The US senators who met Zelensky before are saying the same thing.
Well, there'll be lots of people that... I mean, it was a ridiculous question about Zelensky, what was he about his dress code? I mean, and I know that was not a usual person from the press pack. That was obviously someone who Donald Trump has allowed in mainstream, outside media. Anyway, but to make the point I was going to make...
It was actually the boyfriend of one of the senators, wasn't it?
Nobody went into that meeting, that press conference, to upset anybody. Donald Trump thought he was going to do a deal. That's what they were there to praise, which was the mineral deal, as well as giving a little bit of security. But Donald Trump said himself, getting security to Ukraine from the US is about 2%. He said, I can do that tomorrow. It's not about security, it's about getting the deal, it's about stopping the war. That's what he continued to praise. Obviously, the language, and as the conversation went on, you could tell after...
It was Vance. It was Vance that started the aggression. Vance was the one who sort of provoked... Sure. I think we have to remember that all Zelensky did wrong, Zelensky's crime was not disrespect. It was simply to point out the fact that the last time they had a ceasefire, everyone wants a ceasefire, but the last time there was a ceasefire, Russia broke it. And so it's completely legitimate in the same way that this is the second time as well. Think about what happened in 1994 with the Budapest Memorandum, where Ukraine gave up its nuclear weaponry, nuclear arsenal.
I don't think that Zelensky played that meeting well. He's not the sort of perpetrator here, but he did not play that bit well. His body language was awful. I know, but there comes a point in diplomacy, in set-piece occasions, when you're briefed, you're told, this is your objective, this is what you can't do, this is what you do. He did what he shouldn't have done. That's a reality. He went off script, OK? That's, I'm not defending what happened, of course not. But that whole thing blew up because, they started and he then reciprocated, and there was a whole mess because of it. Now, the good news is, and I think this is really the good news is in Trump land, nothing is for certain, OK? Something that happens one day, we can be talking 2 days later, anything alternative can happen. I'm quite prepared to accept that by the middle of this week, we'll have Zelensky sending out a half apology to Trump, that Trump will go, oh, that sounds fine, and they'll be hugging and kissing and doing the minerals deal. That's all possible. It's also possible the Americans could go entirely the other way. The reality is, it's all to play for, and that's the interesting part of this. It's all to play for. This summit's important because what comes out of here can really lead back towards a unity position rather than division.
What comes out of this meeting this afternoon, though, if it is getting a peacekeeping force on that border, is the reason this started in the first place. To Putin's mind, that is NATO getting closer to Russia.
Well, Putin's...
however you dress up the peacekeeping force.
But that's Putin's mistake, because his whole mad illusion for why this war's come about is to have stopped NATO. He'll end up with NATO on his border. That's the reality.
He's
already got them.
Finland and Sweden, who border Russia, are now part of NATO. I mean, this is literally the opposite of what he wanted.
But the one thing also for certain is actually whatever happens, I think Anne's absolutely right, that Donald Trump will claim victory whatever happens. He'll say that this whole summit is on the back of him getting involved and trying to broker a deal. Didn't quite happen in the way he wanted, but he's forced the Europeans' hand to get together, European leaders to try and step up and spend more cash on defence, something that he's called for many times. So I think Donald Trump, whichever way you look at it, he will claim victory. But I'm always thinking, when you take Donald Trump, I'm always thinking through his eyes, and his perspective is about the American people as well. And so he will always be saying, we've spent a lot of money on the war, we've given them all our weapons, we've given a lot. Actually, he wants something back. And there is a movement, there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah, and as we keep saying, he is a businessman. Let's just go back to central London, where our political editor, Christopher Hope, is outside watching the world leaders arrive. Chris, bring us up to date on who's arrived and what's happening.
That's right. Hi, Dawn. Welcome back to this central London location where this peace summit is taking place. Sir Keir Starmer is coming out every 2 or 3 minutes to welcome the numbers. The number of leaders arriving here is extraordinary and not normal. 16 leaders from Canada, Turkey, and the rest are from the European Union. We've just seen President Ursula von der Leyen from the European Commission. She's arrived. We have the NATO Secretary General, the leaders of France, Norway, Poland, Turkey, Sweden, Czechia. They've all arrived. I've got my book. I'm ticking them off as they arrive. It is quite complicated trying to keep track of it. The reason why they're all here, of course, is that catastrophic falling out. And you've heard the Coldstream Guards now saluting every 5 minutes. Now here comes another car arriving now. Let's see if we can work out who it is. So while they're arriving, I'll carry on talking. So essentially, we're meeting here because of the falling out on Friday night between Zelensky and Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and that's prompted this real feeling of crisis here, and that's where they're meeting on this sunny day in central London. You can see they're securing our future London summit. 2nd of March 2025 is what they're branding it. And there we have Justin Trudeau. He's arriving. He's the PM of Canada. How will you help secure world peace, Mr. Trudeau? How would you deal with Donald Trump, Mr. Trudeau? Can you trust Donald Trump, Mr. Trudeau? There we have it. That's PM Trudeau. They're arriving from Canada, and I reckon that's the 6th to go in. Another 10 to go, Dawn. It is very feeling of intenseness here with these 6 Coldstream Guards saluting as everyone arrives. A real feeling of also a warlike footing for these countries that have known peace for so long.
Thank you very much for that. Be bringing us up to date. The more leaders arrive for the crunch meeting in central London. Coming back to you on this one, Alan. Interesting use of language there from Chris. It's intensive. There's a real feeling of crisis. I'm going into this and reporting on it not feeling unduly threatened, but should we be more worried?
Well, we should be worried about the idea that the West is disunited. We should be very worried about the idea that America, the bastion of freedom, democracy that supported it in a backstop militarily for the last 80 years, is seemingly pulling in another direction. But I say seemingly, that's the key thing. I think it's right to have a sense of something's, gone awry here. The point about it, though, is that we must look to try and put it back together. The crisis can be easily resolved if we come out of this in a unified position, everyone facing the same direction, trying to get Trump back on track.
So getting all 18 leaders there to agree to some kind of plan.
I think they'll do that.
You do think they'll do that?
I think they can't have a summit like this without coming out with some kind of result, or else it will create even more crisis that they couldn't.
Look, Europe is fundamentally united, and that's apart from maybe
it's
sort of
not,
Hungary.
Though, is it? Because the southern European countries
apart from maybe Hungary. Look, I think it's really significant that we've got Meloni there because Italy has been slightly wavering at times on Ukraine, but I think in a funny way, what Trump has done, maybe this is some positive, is that he has a kind of initiated or sort of catalysed a kind of united front by Europe. Because I think a lot of Europeans, even European leaders like Meloni, who might be sympathetic to Trump politically, there's now a realisation that Europe's on its own militarily and that the United States is an unreliable partner at best, and that if there is some kind of major security threat to one of the European nations, then we basically have to help ourselves. And so I think there's going to be a lot more talk in coming years about, months even, about sort of European security frameworks, not necessarily within the framework of the European Union, because obviously there are lots of countries in Europe who aren't in the EU.
Yes.
But this whole idea of, sort of Europe defence capability is something that has just been, subject of think tanks for too long, rather than action. Even though the EU does have a security policy and it has plenty of missions worldwide, but it will need to sort of ramp that up and sort of be much more inclusive, pan-European, sort of to counter the threats that we face.
How confident are you feeling they'll come out of any sort of agreement today, Charlie?
Yeah, I am confident. I think they wouldn't be there otherwise. I agree with that. I think there will be an agreement. The question is then, do they follow through with that agreement? Because they can all come out and say, yes, we're all now going to increase defence spending. At what point, at what time, at what conditions? Is that when economic conditions allow? Is that in 2027? Is it in the next decade? That's the nitty-gritty detail that I think everybody needs to either say, yes, we're going to do it tomorrow, or we're going to supply Ukraine with whatever it is as a united front. So I think they'll agree something, but it's following through with that commitment that will be the test.
is the other interesting thing here, Alan, isn't it? It's the timescale on this. You know, it's like we're talking about 2027 or maybe 2030. I'm getting the impression we need to do things much quicker than that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, in reality, despite it's been such a long week, hasn't it? It was only the beginning of the week that Keir Starmer announced that we're defence spending's increasing. It's all happening. I noted then that he said, oh, in the next Parliament we need to get to 3%, right? That's when we need to get there. Well, that's not true. If the reality is that we've recognised there are threats that necessitate us to get to 3%, we need to get there much quicker, and we need to get probably beyond 3%. And one of the things that this has shown, and my colleagues on the panel have expressed this basically, is that Europe has come out of this in a certain unified position, at least in theory, and the key to it is, in practice, is Europe now going to step up? We've had a holiday from history for at least the last 35 years, as it were, maybe longer if you judge the long-term decline in European military spending. Isn't it time European countries, some of whom are great nations like our own, actually start acting like that and start showing that there is a value to what we're doing in the world, and what the value that we're doing with our defence forces, and that we should be filling the void, not allowing countries like Russia and China to have it all their own way?
Which brings us back to, where does the money come from, Jonathan?
Well, that is a really good question, Dawn. I think that it was absolutely the wrong decision. I think that this might be the first major point of disagreement on the panel. I think it was a big mistake to increase defence on the backs of the poorest in the world. Because when we talk about, you can talk about the morality of it, about sort of stopping aid, and I'm a firm believer in foreign aid for moral reasons besides anything else, but just let's talk about the politics of it. When we talk about hard power, as we know, hard power doesn't come on its own. And this phrase, soft power, which a lot of people hate, it exists. Foreign aid exists in order to serve a country's interests. Partly because it's in Britain's interests that the world has political stability, and that the poorest people in the world are not starving, and there is not sort of conflict being sown in various parts of the world, etc. And there is development. That is a political goal as well as an ethical one. And if you sort of retreat from that space, then other countries, such as Russia and China, will step in. But also, the United States, for example, is a good example of this, because Trump wants to have his cake and eat it, because he wants to, he's obviously very, very big on hard power, but he also believes in this idea of spheres of influence, a very Russian idea, that sort of these major great powers that get sort of carve up the world between them, they have their spheres of influence. Russia, sort of wants the old Soviet Union, and sort of, sort of this irredentist belief in sort of like Russian peoples in sort of the Baltics, Ukraine, etc., Central Asia. And obviously the United States has always had its political backyard in sort of the Europe, South America, etc., which obviously it's done many things with. But now the United States is turning on its allies and showing itself to be unreliable. It can't have that soft power anymore. It's sort of ceding the soft power, and all it has is hard power, and that doesn't work. And foreign aid is one of the key areas where we have to use our soft power, because Britain doesn't have a lot of hard power, as Alan's been pointing out. So soft power is the major sort of the influence, the vehicle for influence. We have look, Charlie, you and I have been debating this in this particular issue for many years, and we know that when there are major political crises that come around the corner that we didn't see coming, money appears. COVID happened, and the government suddenly...
We can't borrow our way out, Jonathan. Come on, we're already in a disastrous position from borrowing.
I said there would be a point of disagreement. Look, the government has ways of raising revenue in times of emergency. That is undeniable. And this is not sort of day-to-day spending. This is investment, Dawn. This is in the same way as our infrastructure. This is security infrastructure. This is critical long-term investment. Of course we can borrow for that. Markets are not going to run away if we do that, in the same way that markets survived and didn't run away when the government borrowed however many hundreds of billions to pay for our COVID response. So this is one example where it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where you have to balance the ledger one way or another. We can raise revenue.
OK, we're going to come back to this point now, because I'm sure both Chris and Alan have something like to say on this one. We're just going back to Central London, our political editor Christopher Hope, because we have been seeing more leaders arrive as we've been speaking. Chris, bring us up to date.
Yeah, 9 out of the 16 have arrived now, Dawn. We've also got the NATO Secretary-General and the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. France here, Germany here, Norway, Poland, Turkey, Sweden, Czechia and Denmark. And we're shouting out questions like, You know, how will you enforce the peace? How can you get on with Donald Trump? These are questions that we're shouting. We know inside they'll be discussing. There's a feeling of real tenseness here with the Coldstream Guards clicking their boots, saluting as they arrive. A real feeling of a warlike footing for these leaders who have been so used to peace for so long. It's the end of what we call the peace dividend after the Second World War. Another arrival just now.
Very
How can you bring peace to Ukraine, sir? There we have it. They're all pointing at the sky thinking how good the weather is, but really it's foreboding, I think, is settling over this conference here. It's a really serious time for all these European nations. And of course, the fact that Trudeau's flown in, we've got the leaders of the European Commission, the European Council, a dozen or so EU leaders, shows the importance of what's happening inside. What they'll be discussing, though, is what happened yesterday was that Zelensky, he met with Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. This idea of the coalition of the willing. Keir Starmer wants them all to step up, join this force to enforce the peace in Ukraine, pay more for defence and support Ukraine more. Overnight, of course, the UK has done a deal to give over £2 billion from interest earned on Russian assets here. Why can't other countries do the same? It's a question now of the whole continent of Europe, at the moment led by Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron from France, stepping up to defend Ukraine, because it looks like the US has, as things stand, disengaged.
Thank you very much, Chris. We'll be joining you throughout the show to bring us up to date. So here we're talking about money there with Chris. You know, Europe, the European leaders there have to agree on raising defence spending to sort this problem out. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, especially if we can't rely on America. But the question, the bottom line, certainly for the UK, and I suspect in many of those other European countries, where is this money coming from? We know in America they have cut foreign aid. Donald Trump did that, one of the first things he did.
They've severed it, basically. They've kind of they want to dismantle the aid agency.
Yep. OK, and Keir Starmer has done so over here, despite it being a manifesto pledge. So where is the money coming from?
Well, you've got to take the money from every government department, frankly. So you've got to cut foreign aid, as sad as it is. And I started off working and supporting a government that supported 0.7% of GDP. So, you know, but I'm sorry, that's just the reality.
Which is actually a legal commitment, so it technically... technically...
Yeah, how we look at that. Can I just make the point, though, on overseas aid? This is really quite important. Starmer's taking it back down to the level it was when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. Now, if you remember, for 1 second here, Tony Blair had some pretty good soft power. OK, the cool Britannia idea, what he was doing, and that sort of setup. As always, it's how you use your money that counts in this sort of area. I personally do ultimately think we should be spending more on foreign aid. I think it was the right decision right now, though, to start there, but it has to go well beyond there. But I just want to go back to this idea that we can still have a large impact with a slightly smaller pot if we focus the money properly. What I think we're doing, though, as I keep on reading, is we're spending a lot of this overseas aid budget on funding asylum seekers in the UK. Now, that's a huge problem. That is not what that budget is supposed to be spent on, and that tells you that we've got a fundamental issue when it comes down to how we've even considered this foreign aid budget.
I absolutely agree. I mean, look, you know, all the seized Russian assets, why don't we use that money? Or why can't we do things that, you know, we can...
Well, this is what the $2.25 billion that Rachel... I'm not going to say Rachel accounts, that's terribly rude, but Rachel Reeves sat and signed last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So there are ways to, without sort of borrowing, because, you know, as Johnson rightly said, you know, we've had a COVID pandemic, we borrowed a lot there, there are still debts to be paid. That debt ultimately will have to be paid, and that'll be the next generation, who will be even more in an insecure world when there's advances in technology and AI, and when this war comes to an end and countries grow again, and, you know, even if Russia has been the aggressor, absolutely, and, you know, has its forces depleted, if there is peace, if the war comes to an end, which we all hope, they will rebuild again. There's no doubt about that at some stage. So there will always be a generation of people that I think are under threat. Therefore, you can't just borrow your way and to spend out of this particular crisis. You've got to make tough decisions, and cutting foreign aid is one of them.
That's quite a sobering thought process there, isn't it, Alan? The fact that the situation we're in now isn't really going to go away anytime soon. What happens now with the peacekeeping force on that border is probably going to just be there forever.
Well, that is a possibility. The reality is that golden halcyon age, the idea that we were in the 1990s and 2000s blissfully, kind of going to go through life at the end of history, the end of ideology, it's been proven completely wrong. The reality is we're now back to a multipolar world with lots of threats, a kind of world that our parents, grandparents would have been very familiar with, and which we had the good fortune not to have to live through for a portion of our lives. But it's back, and it's only going to get worse in terms of the uncertainty and the degrees that we're going to have to sort of react to that. So part of this is going to be an acceptance across the free world to say that freedom requires fighting for. There are always going to be threats to that. Those threats are likely to be more complicated and more convoluted than ever in the coming years ahead, and we will have to respond, and that involves looking at things like defence budgets that we thought would be happily down in the 1s and 2%, and they'll have to be in the 3%, 4s and 5%, because that's just the world we live in now.
Going back to your point you raised about foreign aid funding migrants coming over here and being looked after over here, what do we do with that situation?
Well, that situation obviously not, it requires urgent remedial action. Everyone understands that. The government understands it, the opposition understands it, all the parties get there has to be a change. In reality, we have to bring in a system pretty quickly that's going to, firstly, reduce the ability of asylum seekers to take advantage of the generosity of this country and make sure that only those who are really qualified for that status get it. And secondly, of course, that we reduce that legal migration situation as well, because as we keep on discovering, the more you delve into the figures, it is fine to have people coming in for low-paid jobs who are doing those jobs nobody else is doing, but they are bringing with them 4 to 5 dependents on average who are then sapping the state. So is it really worth it? Is it worth having that one job in the NHS filled when you have all those other people coming on who are going to end up on benefits?
There you go, Jonathan. We save a fortune by stopping migration, legal and illegal.
I don't really see how the migration issue sort of fits in with the general.
You just explained it very well. I thought.
Well, I still
Spending money on it.
Well, I still don't really understand why that has to be the primary concern when we're talking about sort of budgets right now. Clearly, asylum, as we've discussed many times, is an internationally recognised right. It is not illegal to claim asylum. People have a right to seek sanctuary, and obviously their claims should be processed. The reason that we're spending so much money on sort of accommodation for asylum seekers is that there is a huge backlog in processing claims, which was deliberately sort of prolonged by the last government as a kind of deterrent, which was shameful in itself. Under Blair, there was no such backlog. Cases were dealt with very, very swiftly. And as I also said many times on this programme, if you had a system where people could, for example, claim asylum from France, then that would sort of shut down so many of the smuggling routes, and you'd have, if you allow people safe and legal means to claim asylum here, that would also sort of just stop a lot of the problem. Clearly, that we have a very, as we keep discussing, we live in a very, very dangerous world where there are conflicts erupting, and when conflict comes to your house, you don't stay in your house. No one wants to be a refugee, Dawn. People are forced out, and when they're forced out, they go somewhere.
Well, Charlie, you work for that government. It's all your fault.
All mine. So sorry. And
personally,
but Jonathan's absolutely. You've highlighted the fundamental failure with Europe. The mass migration that's taken all the way through Europe, whether it's through Germany under Merkel, all the way to when people get to France, then they hop on a dinghy and come over to the UK. There is a lot of money, as Alan absolutely rightly said, that is spent on that situation that shouldn't have been spent when it came from foreign aid. But the question is, I would ask, are we in a more safer world? Are we going to be in a safer world in the next 10 years? We're in a more disruptive world, it feels now, because we've got a different president in the US who's doing things very differently compared to what we're the norm and what we experienced in the 90s and 2000s. But are we going to be in a safer world at the end of Donald Trump's presidency? I think we probably will be, because we would have all... because of the point... Well, Charlie... Well, the answer is because we're going to increase defence spending, and we're going to be able to defend...
Well, the US withdrawing from NATO, that's going to make us safer, is it? That's going to make the world safer.
Well, they're not... Hold on, no. Let me finish. They're not withdrawing from NATO. They've asked us, and we should be...
I'm not saying they will, but Musk has literally tweeted about it.
OK, but, Donald Trump said in his first term that NATO countries should be spending more on defence. So we shouldn't be surprised. This isn't a new phenomenon about asking European countries...
We're talking about the United States possibly withdrawing from the international...
But I've just acknowledged, we live in a more disruptive world, but are we going to live in a safer world post-Donald Trump? I think we will, because we're increasing our defence spending. What's controversial about that?
Well, I'm saying that it's not safe if you have a country...
What, us spending more on defence?
If you look... there is only obviously Europe needs to spend more on defence, but
Well, there
the
you
whole
go. That's the point I'm making.
no, Charlie, the whole architecture of post-war security is anchored in the United States, whether we like it or not. And now you have a system where you have such a transactional president that China might think it can invade Taiwan without sort of adverse consequences. Is the United States going to risk war with China over Taiwan? I think not. If Russia, gets what it wants in Ukraine, decides to sort of push elsewhere, or decides to renew its campaign deeper into Ukraine, or into Georgia again, or the Baltics, Poland even, sort of what kind of response can Putin expect there?
But that is the shift of the US presidency.
But how does that make the world safer?
Can I propose a compromise measure here to bring peace between the two of your positions?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is the shift of the US presidency. It is America first. So it is a move away from this idea that you articulate rightly that for so long it has been America as the defender of the free world. That's no longer the case.
Can I suggest that we might not in this Trump presidency see the world being a safer place, to use that terminology, but the world, or certainly the free world, will be more prepared for the challenges that are going to come at us at the end of this period. Whether that's for a bad reason or a good reason, it doesn't matter. I think at the end of this period we will be in a better place to assess our own defence needs in this country and what we can do than we were beforehand. And I think, again, the idea that we've ever really had to rely solely on the Americans to solve our problems, we got away with it for a long time, but it's not really a morally good position to be part of. We have to be realistic.
It was always in the United States' interest, Alan.
Yeah, I would agree. It was in their interest as well. But the point of this is that part of that was a bit of a game that we were all playing to say, you pay for it and we'll, kind of go along with it in that sort of way. Well, OK, they're now saying we don't want to pay for it anymore. OK, fine. Realistically, we have to step up, don't we? The rest of the free world has to step up and do its bit now. It can afford to. That's a relative. These are some of the richest countries in the world. To suggest that we can't afford our own defence is madness.
Mm-hmm. And do you think one of the conversations that needs to come out of this, going back to the immigration issue we have, is the leaders of the European countries getting together and sorting out the migration problem we have across Europe?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's clearly part of the issue that's been paralysing a lot of action in other areas, the need to resolve this giant problem that, again, is only going to get worse. And, again, Jonathan's right to point out that conflicts are going to increasingly come and cause people to want to move. But there is going to have to be a step change as to how we respond to that, because the world of today is very different to the world of the 1940s and 50s, when, a lot of the conventions were drawn up. Things do evolve. I mean, we've seen things evolve. The European Convention on Human Rights has evolved dramatically from when it was first signed up to by many countries. So evolution is expected in international discussions around these subjects, and we have to get with the programme and work out what kind of world we want to see going forward.
Mm-hmm. And how do we feel about the fact that Zelensky, who we believe is there, we haven't seen Zelensky go into this meeting yet, is going straight from here to meet the King up in Norfolk? Do we think, Charlie, that our royal family have almost been weaponised in this incident?
I wouldn't necessarily weaponise, but I think it's a good thing. Yeah, of course. I think the king, the monarch, to show, as a European country and as someone that's obviously the king for a Commonwealth as well, it's showing support to a European ally that has been invaded. I think that's a good sign. I think it's a good symbol. I think the Prime Minister was obviously right to welcome Zelensky to Downing Street. I thought it was a bit much, but in terms of the optics, and there was too much of a you've got to tread a very fine line. It's very right to welcome a European ally.
I think it's.
But I think the King will do a perfectly good job.
The question I have is, was the King going to meet Zelensky before Friday? I suspect not. Maybe.
I suspect not as well, but none of us know.
Here's the thing.
Because it wasn't expected in the country. But if he came to the UK on a planned visit, I think he probably would, yes.
But Starmer is obviously in a difficult position, because he had, after Friday's debacle, so many leaders, European leaders, sort of scrambling to offer their tweeted support for Zelensky. Zelensky making the point of sort of thanking each one in turn. And Starmer didn't want to do that because he thinks, rightly or wrongly, that the UK might have some leverage over the United States, over Trump specifically, and that he doesn't want to antagonise Trump. And so but the upshot of that is that now, he sort of goes out of his way to shower praise on Zelensky and to reassure him, to show him that he's not alone, that the UK supports him. And obviously the King, as such an important figure in our quote-unquote soft power, is vital for that. So Zelensky knows, without Starmer having to sort of denounce Trump, that the UK is on Ukraine's side.
But they're setting it up. But they're setting it up, I think. They're setting this up very nicely to show we're really behind you, Volodymyr Zelensky, absolutely behind you. By the way, this is what you're going to have to do next. You're going to have to issue some kind of apology to Trump. You're going to have to get around the table again and do that. But know that comes from a position of love and help and support. You've just met the King, shows your position is strengthened. Here's all diplomacy in action. What we are seeing is the British state employing all its resources to get a diplomatic result that's going to be in Britain and Ukraine's best interest.
Have you been impressed how Starmer handled initially his meeting with Trump and the situation since?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's fair to say that he did perform very well in Washington. That was, I felt it was always going to happen. I think there were things that were always working towards that advantage, in the sense that, Trump does have a positive view of the UK. He's spoken and met Starmer before. They've got on surprisingly well, despite coming from very different political viewpoints. But they do seem to have got on well personally as well. And Starmer was able to employ that to Britain's advantage in that meeting. It's not a show.
Do you think, most importantly, Alan, he didn't rise to the bait when Trump did try and have a little bit of a poke there, unlike Zelensky, who did take the bait? Starmer didn't.
Yeah, and that reflects, I think, the reality that British diplomacy has been honed over centuries, and we know how to do these sorts of things. And again, I'm not putting anything on Zelensky's shoulders here for having not perhaps followed the script, but he didn't follow the script. I'm sure that his Foreign Office would have prepared for him in that sort of way, whereas Starmer absolutely did follow the script, and that's the difference between the two leaders. But what Starmer's done since as well, bringing people to London, I know it was planned in advance, but the importance of this, he's handled this very well so far.
It's just such a fine line to tread now for any of these world leaders, in particular Starmer, who wants to be that bridge literally over troubled waters, to keep Trump on side, but also to give that very, very warm welcome we saw to Zelensky. I mean, literally sort of like, coming out of Downing Street to meet him and waving him off in the car. I've never seen him do that before, for a start. It's a very fine line that Starmer's got to tread here.
It is, and those optics, I think, they do matter, but I think if you're the type of personality that Donald Trump is, I think it probably might be more water for ducks back for him, hopefully, because he will understand what you've got to do to get by. But Donald Trump will still see things through the prism of a deal, as we've said before. But that's why I think we are the best in the world when it comes to diplomacy. That we've got the best, I think, diplomats in the world. But that's why also, the state visit for Donald Trump, which obviously was extended when Keir Starmer was over.
We're going to come on to that one in a minute.
That will go ahead. That will still happen. Yeah. That won't be cancelled. Because
it might be kicked into the long grass a bit. It's like Theresa May offered Trump a state visit when she first went down. It didn't happen to Washington. It didn't happen for 2 years.
Well, just going to come back on that point. Let's go back to Christopher Hope now in central London, watching the world leaders arrive for this very important meeting today. Chris, bring us up to date on what's happened.
I reckon around 12 of the world leaders arrived so far. We just saw the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, go in. Ursula von der Leyen from the Commission, she's gone in. The NATO Secretary-General, as well as the leaders of the following countries: France, Germany, Denmark, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Turkey, Canada, Finland, Sweden, Czechia and Romania. Just a few to come. I think the Spanish PM hasn't yet arrived. A real feeling here of tenseness. The only sound is a helicopter overhead and the sound of those boots on the ground from those 6 Coldstream guards behind me, arranged in height order, being commanded by a sergeant major with a very firm. You may have heard me say that and looked at me, but there we have it. I mean, it really is a feeling of tenseness, unlike we've had it from previous EU summits. I've been to loads of these things, or G20s, and so it goes on. This is a meeting about the threat of Russia to the continent of Europe, and these people behind us are going to have to step up soon, because it looks like, as things stand, you can't guarantee on US support, and that's why Keir Starmer is looking for 3 things here: a coalition of the willing, so countries to offer up troops for a European peacekeeping force in Ukraine, also support from the US, of course, through fighter jets and radar, and also more money to help Ukraine. We've given them about over £2 billion overnight from Russian assets, interest on Russian assets held in the UK. Someone else arriving just now. Let's see if we can see who it is. Let's see who's getting out. This could be Zelensky, we think. Let's see. Just bear with me now, Dawn. Let's see who's getting out of the car. We can't quite see from our angle here. It's Zelensky. President Zelensky, how will you get peace? President Zelensky, how can you deal with Donald Trump? What do you want from Europe, President Zelensky? How can you get peace in your country? Will you go back to the Oval Office? How can you get Trump to speak to you, sir? Will you return? There we have it. President Zelensky talking there with Sir Keir Starmer for a long time there, showing the important thing of this relationship. Clearly, Sir Keir Starmer, Dawn, sees himself as someone who is overseeing the bridge between the European Union leaders and, of course, the US. That's a role which both Donald Trump, Keir Starmer has played himself. He's been talking yesterday to Donald Trump, also the day before, meeting with Zelensky. Later on, that man there, President Zelensky, wearing the same clothes he wore into the Oval Office, of course. He is flying or driving or travelling into Sandrium to meet the King, and those photographs, I think, will be on the front page of all the newspapers tomorrow. They'll go around the world and they will probably impress on Donald Trump how isolated he is now internationally after falling out there so spectacularly publicly with President Zelensky.
Chris, once again, we saw a very, very warm greeting between the two men then, between Keir Starmer and Zelensky on the steps. Zelensky seemed to spend the longest time on the steps there in front of the assembled press, like yourself. We could also hear cheers in the background. That obviously sounded like quite a warm greeting all round for Zelensky.
Yes, I'm thinking there were crowds gathered since I arrived here about an hour ago in the park nearby. I think there was an organised group of Ukrainians who were trying to organise themselves to be in Downing Street on Friday. That's changed now they've come over to here, of course, where we moved to a different central London location. They're clearly trying to show how they support Ukraine. The UK supports Ukraine. We heard that from Keir Starmer. It's very important to try and ensure that that message is heard by Donald Trump, I think.
Indeed, thank you very much. That's Christopher Hope live in the central location there, where our Keir Starmer is holding a meeting of 18 leaders from around Europe, including Turkey and Canada, to discuss where we go now with the situation in the Ukraine and international defence spending to deal with the threat from Russia. If you're joining us live, I have in the studio with me political commentator Jonathan Liss, former special advisor to Michael Gove, and our Alan Mendoza, who is head of...
It sounded like I was a former advisor to Michael Gove.
Sorry?
You didn't say Charlie's name.
Did I not say Charlie?
That's okay.
Oh my God!
I was definitely.
I thought I said Charlie.
I was never an advisor to Michael Gove. I advised Michael Gove to do many things, but none of them.
No, exactly. Nothing we can repeat on air. And Alan Mendoza from the Henry Jackson Society. Sorry, there are so many names in my head this afternoon. Not quite as many as our Keir Starmer has, obviously, Alan. There's a lot of people going in there. What did you make of, the warmth that Starmer greeted Zelensky with there on the steps?
Yeah, it's genuine. I mean, you know, as with all the previous prime ministers who have prosecuted this war, you know, on Britain's behalf, as it were, there is a genuine respect and admiration for what Volodymyr Zelensky has done as leader of a country that was supposed to be turned over by Russia in a week and has been fighting for 3 years.
Give him 3 days.
Of course, exactly. So, of course, there's that warmth, the sense of he's an embattled democratic leader who we've been supporting and we will continue to support. So it's obvious in that embrace that is very real.
Alan, thank you very much. We will be coming back to this story as we're covering the breaking news from central London of the world leaders gathering to discuss the situation with the Ukraine and Russia. But now let's time to the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. A look at the top stories at this hour. Well, world leaders are in London for talks on the war in Ukraine, with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and French President Emmanuel Macron among those being welcomed by Sir Keir Starmer. In the last few minutes, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also arrived there in central London, days after a heated Oval Office exchange with Donald Trump sparking divisions among Western allies. Before the meeting, Sir Keir agreed with Baltic leaders that Europe must unite to push for urgent action to secure Ukraine's future. He also said that UK will work with France on a peace plan to stop the fighting, which will be discussed then with the United States. That summit follows extraordinary scenes on Friday at the White House, where Donald Trump clashed with Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him to strike a deal with Russia, or, he said, the US are out. But Dame Priti Patel told us earlier here on GB News that the UK's relationship with the United States remains firm, although she did condemn the scenes in Washington.
Those scenes on Friday in the White House were awful. They were absolutely awful. And, you know, I genuinely say this, when we look at President Zelensky, we feel a great deal of respect towards him because of the way in which he's conducted himself over the 3 years of this appalling illegal conflict and the barbarism of Russia, which he and his people, his country, has stood up to. And that's why we will always stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and the people of Ukraine.
In other news this hour, train fares are going up and so's the pressure on commuters already battling record cancellations. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. And campaigners are warning it will just pile further misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. Israel has blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza after the first phase of a ceasefire with Hamas expired. It follows the group projecting the US proposals to extend the truce by 6 weeks in return for the release of hostages. Israel's Prime Minister says there will be further consequences unless the group changes its position. Hamas, though, has accused Israel of blackmail and called on mediators to intervene. Talks on a second phase of the deal, including more hostage releases, have barely begun. Pope Francis remains in a stable condition after suffering a breathing crisis over the weekend as he battles double pneumonia. In hospital now for the 17th day. The Vatican says the 88-year-old had a peaceful night, though, and is receiving treatment to help him breathe. He was admitted to hospital on February the 14th with a severe respiratory infection that led to further complications. A full medical update is expected later today. A private spacecraft has landed on the moon, and this one, well, this time is still standing. Blue Ghost, built by Firefly Aerospace, is the first commercial lander to touch down in one piece after a rival mission toppled over last year. It's part of a new space race with private companies teaming up with NASA to unlock the moon's secrets. And experts say it could lead to cheaper missions and even help humans return to the lunar surface. In fact, no one's walked on the moon since 1972, but that could all change very soon. And last night's Brit Awards went brat as Charlie XCX dominated, scooping 5 trophies. Here's the moment she claimed one of those top honours.
Charlie XCX! I'm living proof that maybe it takes a long time, but you don't need to compromise. If you believe in yourself enough, and honestly, if you make good enough music, people will resonate with you and be right there with you.
She won Song of the Year, the Album of the Year, and was also named Songwriter of the Year and went on to win Best Dance Act. Ezra Collective, Sam Fender and Stormzy were also among the other big British winners. Congratulations to them all. Those are the latest headlines. One more update from me in around half an hour. Now, though, it's back to the very bratty dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. And he can make any comments he likes about my wardrobe. It's spring. I'm wearing a bright pink. It's a very cheerful colour. OK, and now let's get straight back into today's story, shall we? In the last few minutes, Zelensky has arrived in central London for those crucial talks on European security. Sir Keir Starmer has reiterated his unwavering support for Zelensky this weekend after his disastrous meeting with Donald Trump. It comes as the Prime Minister reveals he and Macron have agreed to work on their own peace plan for Ukraine in a bid to build bridges. So let's cross back to central London now and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is live on the scene as Keir Starmer welcomes the world leaders. Chris, a busy day for you there. I mean, so many arrivals. I think we're expecting 18 world leaders there, aren't we? Or European leaders mainly, to meet for this very, very important conference this afternoon.
That's right. Hi, Dawn. Welcome back here. We can't say where we are for security reasons, a central London location here. No. So far, everyone has arrived apart from Spain. So 16 world leaders, including the NATO Secretary General, the heads of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, of course, and the President of the European Council. I'll quickly run through those countries to give you a scale of this summit, the like of which hasn't really been seen in Europe for decades. The President Zelensky from Ukraine has just arrived. The leaders of France, Germany, Denmark, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Turkey, Canada, Finland, Sweden, Czechia, Romania. Right now, I think, is arriving the Prime Minister of Spain. If you can swing your camera over there, Steve, we'll see it arrival now. Here comes Sir Keir Starmer, the last arrival here. There we are. Can you get peace, Sir Keir Starmer? There we have the PM of Spain arriving now, Dawn. That is the last. That means we have a full list here of world leaders. I've never seen anything like this in London before. There's a feeling of tenseness in the air. You have 6 Coldstream guards who are saluting, clacking their heels on the ground as they arrive. A helicopter was overhead earlier. This is a group of individuals, world leaders, not used to dealing with the threat of war. They are now, and they are doing that without the guaranteed support of the US. And that's why it feels very, very intense. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is trying to get 3 things agreed with these individuals today. They want to strengthen Ukraine, give them more money to support their war effort. They want a European element of the security guarantee. That'll be some form of European force, a coalition of the willing, if you like, led by the UK and France, and of course a US backstop. That could be long-range jets, that could be radar. Those 3 things is what they're trying to agree behind us. Later on, we'll be hearing from Sir Keir Starmer at a press conference. We'll be asking him how it's got on, but it's very, very intense. I think in the past week, the tone of the European leaders has changed. They are now on the front foot, facing a possible threat from Russia themselves, rather than relying on an uncertain leadership for them in the White House.
Political editor Christopher Hope is live in central London at the crucial meeting of the 18 world leaders. Most of Europe, including Turkey and Canada, are gathering there today. And as you just heard Chris say, looking at ways to join together to strengthen Ukraine, to work together as Europe, and to ensure that there is a USA backstop. It's very important, and it keeps going. You know, it's unprecedented. We haven't seen a meeting like this since the Second World War in London, and we are talking about a threat of war. There's no getting away from it, and it's a very tense meeting. We are expecting to see a group photo of all of those leaders together very soon, and we will bring you any further developments live as that goes on. We're expecting that meeting to last for a couple of hours. Zelensky is greeted very, very warmly by the Prime Minister, and after this meeting, Zelensky is then travelling up to Norfolk, where he's having a meeting with the King. So a very, very busy and very important day. So joining me now is Conservative MP and Vice President of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Sir Alec Shelbrooke. Sir Alec, thank you very much for joining me today. Obviously, a very, very important, very serious day. What do you make of this meeting, and what can we expect to come out of it?
Good afternoon, Dawn. Well, I think what has to come out of it now is a realistic set of targets and how things are going to be achieved. The time for talking and discussions and having ambitions, that's all gone. Dawn, I thought you put it very well that we are in a totally different world now to the one we've been in even for the last 3 years. And quite frankly, there has been an absolute arrogance of European leaders, and I include our own country in that, of pausing or finding ways to capitulate debate or finding excuses not to spend on defence. And this attitude of saying to American presidents, no, we're not doing that and you must be there to defend us, has now come home to roost. And Dawn, this is not new. Everybody is looking at Donald Trump for what he said about NATO European defence spending. George W. Bush said this at Latvia in 2006. Barack Obama said this at Brussels in 2014. Actually, in his first term, Donald Trump actually got European countries to start spending more money, going from only 5 of them meeting 2% to 23 of them now meeting 2%. But I can tell you from when I've been in the Assembly, it is like walking through treacle. There is always an excuse. And the blunt truth is, this isn't happening overnight. So what needs to happen today? Well, if we are going to be supplying the arms to Ukraine, if we are going to be stepping up to making sure we are doing that, we are going to have to put a lot of industry on a war footing and spend a lot of money in making sure that they can quickly react and supply these arms. Because at the moment, they are not there. And we're talking about plans towards the end of this decade where we're fully able to resupply. And Dawn, it's quite frightening that in 3 months, Russia can produce as much armaments as the whole NATO alliance, including America, produce in 1 year.
It is quite frightening. And when you use phrases like on a war footing, these are phrases that, you know, most of us haven't had in our vocabulary since the end of that Second World War. I mean, obviously, conflicts have gone on, but this feels like such a momentous day. It's worrying to think that America isn't there. Do you think... How important is America to NATO?
So I think the most important point we must always remember about NATO is that it is a deterrent force. And of course, that's been the twisting from Putin, saying that it was a threat to Russian borders. And it was not. It was a deterrent force. Deterrents are as strong as someone believing you are going to use them. This has always been my argument with the SNP, saying we need to get rid of Trident. We will never use the weapon. We are using it every single day because it is the nuclear deterrent. But your enemies have to be convinced that you will use those things. Now, the positive that I can feel I can bring to this conversation today is that I was at the North Atlantic Council only 2 weeks ago, and what was coming from the Americans was clear that Article 5 remains intact. In fact, the Vice President of J.D. Vance said at the Munich Security Conference that Article 5 is something that the Americans would always be there for, and that the NATO alliance is important. But that must be separated from America making it very clear that they are not going to be stepping up to keep the war going, in their view, in Ukraine. And I think that what has to happen now is that you won't find anybody who doesn't say that what happened on Friday in the Oval Office was absolutely appalling, frightening, and leaves European defence in a vulnerable state. But it is important at moments like these that we have patience, calmness, let the dust settle. Have this conference we're having today. Talk is cheap. There's going to have to be some tangible outcomes. The Prime Minister is going to have to come to the House on Monday and make a statement as to what's happened this weekend and maybe lay out the tough decisions. And that may mean we've got estimates days, debates this week on the budget. That may mean that Chancellor of the Exchequer has to stand in the Commons on Tuesday and outline exactly where significant spending is going to come from.
Yeah, Alec, just to be clear, just for people that aren't sure, Article 5 is where one member of NATO is attacked, then everybody steps up to work together to defend that. And
That's correct.
How confident are you that... I mean, we know that there's some of the stubborn southern countries in Europe aren't happy about increasing their defence spending. How confident are you that we're going to come out of this with all these countries, 18 of them, agreeing?
In place, and I think that the complacency of European nations now is in a stark reality that if you want to have a deterrent process in place, you're all going to have to be seen to step up. I mean, look, there are many people who would say that Ukraine is a very long way from here and why aren't we involved? But I'm afraid it's not a very long way from here. It is in every single shop in this country. I live in a small village. It's in my local shop, you know, and I'm talking about inflation. The cost of living crisis, as often described, is a direct result of the attack on the 22nd of February on, you've got 23rd of February on Ukraine. And strangely enough, I was speaking in a debate in the Commons, I think 1 month before Russia invaded, where I said we are in a Cold War. We are back in the Cold War and we must increase defence spending, to which many people said, no, I don't believe we are in a Cold War. Well, it wasn't much longer before actually Europe had a hot war. And can we just get back to a very clear point in all of this? Russia has invaded sovereign European territory. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. This country alone has taken in tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees. This war is our war, and it's all very well with Americans saying, well, you know, we don't want to get involved. They're on the other side of the Atlantic. This isn't a NATO operation, but this is a European war, and Europe is going to have to step up to the plate.
Alec, just finally, one very quick question for you. It felt to me personally like something slightly shifted on Friday afternoon in the Oval Room in the White House. It felt suddenly this was a lot more serious. How worried are you personally about this really developing into a very serious global situation?
Everybody should be very worried. And I think people should recognise that there could be a massive attack on this country from Russia that does not involve weapons, does not involve missiles raining down, but it does involve a cyber hack that could cripple every public service we rely on. It could be the cutting of undersea data cable, which would cripple the economy of this country. If you look at a war, and the objectives when people have a war, it is to financially and economically cripple a country. That is not too difficult for our enemies to do. And I think we all must be aware of that. And actually, that's why the Baltic states are so important. And we must be clear we would defend them, because a lot of NATO cyber defence starts in Latvia. It gets researched in Estonia. It wasn't by accident that the data cable between Estonia and Finland was cut.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's Vice President of NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Sir Alec Shelbrooke. Alec, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Excuse me. Yes. Well, we've seen a cyber attack before, haven't we? I mean, many of our hospitals went down the blood transfusion service, and that was an accident. So can you imagine if that was a targeted attack? In any case, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. And do you want some good news? Please, yes, let's have some, shall we? It's the final week to see how you could win one of our two amazing prize bundles in our latest giveaway. Each one has a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers and a whopping £10,000 in tax-free cash. But hurry, because lines close on Friday. Here's how you do it.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of two big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have two prize bundles that have to be won. There's two lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed, because we want a bit of cheering up today, don't we? I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Now, Labour are set to U-turn on a proposal to give workers the right to switch off outside of working hours for fear it will place far too much of a burden on businesses. At least it's a change of pace, isn't it? Don't go anywhere. All the much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Basically, we know the people behind Bond are the Broccoli family. And for the last 30 years, Cubby Broccoli's daughter, Barbara, and her half-brother, Michael G. Wilson, have been looking after the franchise and done very well with it. When you think of what a great Bond Daniel Craig was.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't had a new movie for 4 years, and now it looks like Amazon are going to take over the helm, and apparently relations are strained between Barbara and Stephen and Amazon, which to me sounds like they've, even though it's their baby, they've been pushed aside. So they've decided to step back. So now this new guy, Jeff Bezos from Amazon, is asking you who you would like to be the next 007. One name in the papers is Tom Cruise. But he's American. But
no. This is what worries me about Amazon having it, though. It's going to become really Americanised.
Yeah, or very, very woke. I mean, are we going to have a woman playing James Bond?
I don't know if Jeff Bezos is that woke, is he?
Well, no, but Amazon are quite woke, aren't
they? No, they were woke when it was trendy to be woke, and now that we've got Trump in the White House, then they're not going to be woke at all. I mean, it's the Americanisation I worry about, and I do know somebody else who was in for it, who is Ian Fleming's great nephew, who would have kept it in Britain, right?
It should be kept in Britain,
and it's the Broccolis. They were American. Oh, she is American. But, I mean, they were based in Britain. And we want it to stay British.
They'll keep it at Pinewood. Right time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you very much for joining me on this Sunday lunchtime. Really appreciate your company. Now, we have a little change of pace here because there's only so much we can talk about that meeting that's going on in central London. So we are going to talk about, yes, it is another U-turn, though, to be honest with you. Labour are scrapping a key part of their New Deal for working people. Reports suggest plans to let employees switch off outside of working hours are being dropped by the government to please businesses. I've still got my wonderful panel here with me, political commentator Jonathan Liss and former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley, whose name I remember to say this time. Do you feel terrible about that?
I'm often overlooked. It's OK. I don't
Charlie,
mind. I don't mind.
I never overlook you. God, there's so many names in my head.
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
OK, yeah. Maybe you work too hard, Charlie. Which brings us seamlessly onto this story.
Yes.
That was part of Labour's pledge for working people, but it was bad news for businesses. But now they've done a U-turn on it. It's not going to happen.
Well, quite right too. I mean, it was never going to work in practice because, look, if you wanted to regulate everybody's hours and say when you can and can't work and you shouldn't be emailing people after a certain amount of time, we wouldn't be here now. It's a Sunday afternoon.
Can you imagine how that works in most businesses?
Exactly. And I think that there is... Obviously, with the increase in national insurance contributions, which was not in the manifesto, in fact, it was an outright commitment by the Labour Party to say that they were never going to increase national insurance contributions. They've put an extra burden on business. Yeah. They've now had to row back because if you are...
They said they weren't going to touch defence spending either.
Well, you're right, but
they've increased defence spending.
Increased defence spending.
That's good, isn't it?
They've got to do it now. So, you're right. So there are sometimes, sometimes you've got to make changes when things are the right things to do. But on this, I mean, it's ridiculous because you're entitled to email someone whenever you want. You're entitled to, I think, probably make a call to anybody you want.
Right, Charlie.
But hold on a second, Jonathan. This is ridiculous. I don't have to reply to the email. I don't have to pick up the phone if I don't want to. After my day's done, after my working hours. But if you are running a business, and this goes to the point of the criticism of this Labour government, that none of them around that cabinet table have worked in business. None of them know how to run a small company. None of them know the demands and the pressures that those that are trying to grow and employ other people and invest, how many hours they have to work. So if you're at your desk or after hours emailing until 7, 8, 9 o'clock p.m, that's absolutely fine. not asking anybody to reply to it because it's outside of their working hours, but the idea that you could legislate to ban your boss from emailing out of hours, I think was ridiculous from the start, and that's obviously the decision that the Labour Party have concluded, which is the right one. Just a shame it's come too late and after all the fuss they made during the general election about it.
I think that there is a legitimate...
Jonathan still wants it.
I think there is a legitimate issue here, which is that we have a culture of 24/7 working in this country that a lot of people didn't sign up for and don't want. Now, you know, in the olden days when people didn't have mobile phones or email, you know, you left the office at 5 or 6 or whenever, and that was it. You got back to the next day and then you began again. And now...
We did have telephones, though, Jonathan.
Yes,
quite clear
but I don't... Look, bosses were not probably in the habit of phoning people sort of at 9 p.m, just say, could you remember to do this thing tomorrow that's not very important. Whereas now with the email, you know, you can send out emails at any time, say, you know, this needs to be done. And these things can be done in the working hours. Obviously, if there are emergencies, that's different. And you know, obviously, you and I have the kind of jobs where, you know, we might want to work at the weekends. That's where we sort of apply our trade, and that's fine. No one's being banned from doing anything. Well, no one's being banned from sort of working sort of late or unsociable hours if they want to. It's about giving people a way of sort of not being subjected to quite an oppressive work culture that never used to be the case in this country, that technology has facilitated. I think that's fair. Like, I'm not pretending to have very, very strong views on this particular plank of the government's Labour agenda. I think that there are more important reforms which I'm happy are still going ahead, such as on zero-hours contracts and sort of, you know, giving people more rights from day one in the workplace, which I think is a positive improvement.
Yeah, that is still going through. Do you think
that's still going through?
Well, I think we've got to...
From day one, someone can turn up and just... Oh, I'm pregnant, by the way, I'm taking the next 6 months off.
Well, I think...
Not you personally, obviously.
No. That's not going to happen. But I think we've got to get to a position where we're I mean... Jonathan's right on that, actually. Because I know, I did what they put in my tea. But the whole working practice and the whole culture has changed. So, you know, if you were working contracted hours, if you were in the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then of course you shouldn't expect to be emailed outside of that unless it was an emergency or anything like that. But the flexibility of people now working from home so much, I think comes with the, you know, because people who do work from home, let's be honest, I'm not saying that they're not working, but it does.
Some of them might be watching GB News, which is a very good thing, and could be part work.
It might afford you the opportunity to maybe, in what would have been a traditional lunch break, to do other errands around the house or pick up kids from school or whatever. So there is a much greater element of flexibility if you're working from home. Therefore, you should expect maybe to, you know, respond to a WhatsApp or get an email after hours. It's the give and take of a new way of working. And I think, you know, with that, you could be more open and honest about things and about your life, what you're going to... There's nothing wrong with actually, if you're going to be working... If you're in a job that's actually hybrid or working from home, there's nothing... You know, it's OK to say, by the way, I'm family planning, and that shouldn't stop you from working. But until we accept that the new way of working is flexible working from home, but that comes with maybe emails after hours, to make sure that productivity levels remain high. We've got to accept that give and take.
And small business have been given a bit of a kicking. Come on, the national insurance hike that wasn't in the manifesto either. Businesses are struggling.
Look, I'm not going to pretend that some businesses are not alarmed by the national insurance increase for employers. And, you know,
they all are. Not some of them, Jonathan. Well, they all are.
Some more than others. Look, I mean...
They all are.
This is not a budget that I would have written or delivered. I would have made different choices.
I'd love to read your budget. I bet it'd be fascinating.
VAT, you would have increased income tax, you would have borrowed more, you would have spent more.
Squeak, Charlie. But, you know, that's by the by, because I'm not the Chancellor, thank God.
Thank goodness.
Anyway, yes.
Something we can agree on.
I'll agree on that one. I'm completely neutral, but I'm agreeing on that one. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we do have to leave it on that note for now. Yeah, he's not Chancellor, don't worry about that. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. There's plenty more coming up on today's show. We will bring you that group photos. All the world leaders have now arrived at Central London Summit on Ukraine. But first, let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. The top story this hour, well, Sir Keir Starmer has told European leaders they need to step up at this once-in-a-generation moment. That's as he opened a major defence summit on Ukraine in London. Well, those world leaders are now gathered outside that location in central London. I believe we can take a look at some pictures of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arriving at the conference there, that leadership summit with 18 world leaders gathered as Sir Keir Starmer joins them. And they are all now gathered for a family photo, so-called, as they open that major summit today. Just days after a heated exchange in the Oval Office with Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, who you can see there on the screen, sparking divisions among Western allies. Before meeting Sir Keir Starmer, he agreed with Baltic leaders that Europe must unite to push for urgent action to secure Ukraine's future. He also said the UK will work with France on a peace plan to stop the fighting, which will be discussed with the United States. In other news, train fares are going up, and so's the pressure on commuters already battling record cancellations. From today, the cost of many journeys in England and Wales is rising by around 4.6%, adding hundreds to the price of some season tickets. Campaigners warn it will just pile further pressure and misery on hard-pressed households, with rail cards also becoming more expensive for the first time in over a decade. Israel has blocked humanitarian aid into Gaza after the first phase of a ceasefire with Hamas expired. It follows Hamas rejecting a US proposal to extend the truce by 6 weeks in return for the release of hostages. Israel's Prime Minister says there will now be further consequences unless the group changes its position. Hamas, though, has accused Israel of blackmail and called on mediators to intervene. And a private spacecraft has landed on the moon, and this one is still standing. Blue Ghost, built by Firefly Aerospace, is the first commercial lander to touch down in one piece after a rival mission toppled over last year. It's part of a new space race, with private companies teaming up with NASA to unlock the moon's secrets. Experts say it could lead to cheaper missions and even help humans return to the lunar surface. And that's after the last moon landing, where someone walked on the surface back in 1972. But that could soon change. Those are the latest headlines for now. Aaron Armstrong will have a full roundup for you at 3 o'clock, and Dawn will be straight back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I watched the video yesterday with Meghan Markle announcing this relaunch. What did you make of the video?
It's constantly this rebranding thing that's going on, which is quite interesting. We've had different kind of, way back to Sussex Royal at the very beginning. Here we've now got this new lifestyle series that's coming out. Obviously, she's got this new brand that's going to go alongside it. It's very difficult because royals, as we've said many, many times before, this is not something royals typically kind of do. And obviously these are no longer, if you like, working members of the royal family, but still, Prince Harry, as I keep saying, is a senior member of the royal family. So it's quite a kind of uncharted territory that they're going into. And as I said, this is a bit of a disaster because everything they seem to kind of do when it comes to branding, it just doesn't seem to work.
They seem to really be struggling to find their purpose in the US. Do you think that's fair? I mean, Prince Harry, of course, has got the Invictus Games, which is just the most wonderful thing that he has set up. But it appears that they're not obviously part of the royal family anymore in terms of working royals. They're not senior working royals, but not able to make it in the business world yet either.
You're right, Elliot. I think the Invictus Games is definitely the kind of saving grace. That's the thing that everybody kind of admires and respects them for. But then it's when they keep going back into this kind of celebrity branded lifestyle. I don't think anyone's really that hugely interested. As you said, in the States, you kind of hear people are for them, people are against them. I think most people would rather that they went kind of doing this. I think we've said this so many times before that, as members of the royal family, they should continue down that line and going into this kind of business world. It just, I think I'm right in saying historically with royals and kind of business, it doesn't really work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hello, welcome back to The Weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you very much for your company on this Sunday afternoon. OK, now we're going to bring you some fresh pictures from that Central London summit where 18 leaders from around Europe... Oh, let's have a listen in.
And they wanted to come show the strength of Europe in relation to Ukraine. And so I think the hope, that we're all with you, people of Ukraine, for as long as it takes, and everyone around this table. So it's very, very good to have you here. We're gathered here today because this is a once-in-a-generation moment for the security of Europe, and we all need to stay up. Getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong. It's vital for security of every nation here and many others too. I spoke to our Baltic allies this morning. Together, they obviously are part of our discussion, and all of the friends partners have to lead this moment and grab it with both hands. And in my conversations every week today,
Yeah, you join us live as we are watching Keir Starmer opening the meeting of 18 leaders in central London today. And we are expecting Turkey and Canada included, and they are gathered there today to discuss the situation in Ukraine and obviously the situation that was started on Friday afternoon with that meeting. Lots at stake this afternoon. What they hope to get out of it is a unified Europe to decide what to do with this situation. Also, how much money to spend on defence and how they can work together on this. We know that several countries are not so keen to increase their GDP spending, including the southern countries of Italy, Spain and France. And interestingly, you can see Macron sitting there right next to Sir Keir Starmer. And also the response to Donald Trump, to how we go forward with this very, very tricky situation of treading a fine line of defending Europe at the same time as working with Donald Trump. So let's see what my panel make of this. Political commentator Jonathan Liss and former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley are still with me. Gentlemen, you've been with me for the last hour and a bit. We've been talking about this situation. It's some of the words we've been used about it is sort of, we're talking about a war footing. We're using language that we haven't used in this country for, since the Second World War, Charlie. And it is a very serious... We haven't seen a meeting like this with so many leaders of countries gathered with one aim, and we are talking about a potential war footing.
Yes, and it's language that is obviously terrifying and alarming. And it goes back to that meeting, as you say, at the White House, where, although that particular meeting with Zelensky got out of hand between him and Donald Trump was saying that, World War III could have started if Donald hadn't come in, or if the US wasn't there to sort of help broker whatever Donald was trying to do. So, it is terrifying language when you hear things in that context. But going back to what you just said earlier on about Macron sitting next to the Prime Minister, if we look back at the whole week, Macron was the first European leader to go and see Donald Trump since his inauguration again, his second term. They get on very well. They've obviously known each other for a long time. Obviously, Macron was there, I think, during President Trump's first term as well, I think. So they know each other very well, but they are also two strong figures. They obviously had a very, very robust conversation about Ukraine, and obviously Macron has given his unequivocal support for Ukraine as well. He understands more than anyone, Macron, I think, about Europe and the European Union and wanting to strengthen Europe's hand. So he would have had a robust conversation, I think, with Donald Trump on Monday, called Prime Minister, and obviously they exchanged notes. Prime Minister went to see Donald Trump on Thursday. The soft power that we all talked about, extending an invitation for a state visit to the UK. And then obviously what happened on Friday was unprecedented, and that has now allowed, I think, the Prime Minister to be that figure to say, well, hold on, I'm probably closest to Donald Trump in terms of the UK not having the sanctions of tariffs, what Donald Trump's talked about before, that he might impose on Europe. But Macron is also quite close to President Trump. So they're two strong figures that have different sort of dynamics in terms of relationship with the President of the United States, but are both sitting there next to President Zelensky, showing their unequivocal support to say that, hold on, this is a European fight, this is a European risk, a war, a war footing, because there is that ocean between Europe and the US, as the President of the United States continues to tell us. So it's about who can broker what to get the peace that we want to support Ukraine, because it has been invaded, it's a European ally. And of course, the UK has been a victim of a Russian attack. We've had people poisoned in
Well,
the UK.
I mean, the two facts here are that it is an illegal invasion of a sovereign country, and we have had people killed on our soil by Russia. We keep forgetting the fact that Russia has murdered people in the UK.
Yes, and clearly Russia is not the kind of partner or ally that we might have hoped for at the end of the Cold War. There was obviously a period of détente, and that has sort of gone into deep freeze. That is an incredibly unfortunate and dangerous position. I hope it won't last forever. The Russian people are not our enemies, and Russia is, a great country with a wonderful history. It's a fascinating place, and I very much hope that in the coming years, it can be sort of readmitted into sort of the global community of sort of friendly, peace-loving nations. Clearly, that's not where we are right now. I think we do have to keep reiterating. I know it sort of sounds cliched at this point, but Russia could end this war tomorrow by withdrawing from Ukraine. I know that it's not sort of, I know motherhood and apple pie, but it literally invaded another country. It could pull out. Ukraine is not going to sort of, decide to invade sort of Russia in sort of revenge for that, or sort of carry on this war. That would be the end of the war. So, that we talk about sort of what both sides have to do. We have to remember what started this and what could end this. And similarly, sort of Russia shows no signs of just wanting to sort of say end there. And if you give Russia what it wants, what is going to stop them from trying to get more?
And every time we do talk to any of the Ukrainian MPs, they do raise that situation. I want to move on to a link story. It's front page of your Mail on Sunday today, which is there, as you can see it. There's a campaign online now, Stop the State Visit for Bully Trump. Very unusual take on it from the Mail on Sunday, which is obviously a right-leaning newspaper. As we saw when Starmer visited Trump, he handed over the letter very dramatically from his coat pocket, sort of like, invite you to a second state visit. Obviously, Trump also came over to meet the Queen. What do you make of this campaign to actually stop this state visit now, Charlie?
Well, it's going to go nowhere, frankly. I mean, you can't stop, now that an invitation has been extended on the world stage, to withdraw that. I don't think the Prime Minister would want to withdraw it. I don't think the King would want to withdraw it, because, as I say, the UK now has to position itself as someone that can do business with both. That is obviously a European country. It's not in the EU, but it is obviously showing how it can work with European partners outside of the EU, which I think is very important. But it also has very strong business ties, with the US. It is one of our strongest allies. There is that special relationship between the countries, even if it's not necessarily the two people at the top at any one given time, between the Prime Minister and presidents, times gone by. So, we have a very, very, I think, strong position in the world now where you can balance that and you can balance those relationships. And so I think you wouldn't withdraw a state visit.
Okay, it's actually, we're running out of time on this particular segment, but it's very interesting that, the British Prime Minister is leading a delegation of EU countries, not just European countries, but EU countries, and is actually heading this up. Anyway, so we'll come back to it. Now we have a quick, nice thing for you. If you are in search of some winter sun, here is a forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations for you.
looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. Well, if you're heading towards Spain and the Canaries over the coming days, there will be some rain and potentially some strong winds around at times, but conditions will improve here as the week goes on. For parts of central Med, generally a fine start to the week here, maybe a few showers around, and for eastern areas, certainly temperatures are beginning to climb after a cold few days. And further west, actually, sunshine by the middle part of the week for Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So the tale of two halves that we've seen over the past couple of days are expected to continue as we head over the next couple of days. High pressure very much in charge over the southern half of the UK, but weather fronts trying to move in from the northwest, generally fizzling out once they bump into that area of high pressure. But there is a focus for some more clouds, so a much cloudier start to the day for much of Scotland and Northern Ireland this morning. However, the southern half of England, much of Wales, a bright but chilly start to this morning with some frost in places. As we go through the rest of the afternoon, the cloud remains across much of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Some outbreaks of patchy rain in places, but further south, plenty of sunshine and feeling pleasant where we do see that sunshine. Highs of 10, 11, perhaps 12 degrees in the south. As we then head into Sunday evening, we see this weather front arriving across the northwest, perhaps bringing some outbreaks of quite heavy rain across the Western Isles through Sunday evening, and generally remaining cloudy for much of the rest of Scotland, perhaps some outbreaks of patchy rain across northern England, southern Scotland this evening. A little drier, but still remaining quite cloudy across Northern Ireland. But for Wales and much of southern England, it will be a dry evening to come with plenty of clear spells to start the night. That weather front across the far northwest of Scotland continues to sink its way south and eastwards as we go through Sunday evening and into the start of Monday morning. Perhaps bringing some heavy rainfall for a time, but generally fizzling out as the further south it reaches. For the southern half of the UK, plenty of clear spells, and that likely to lead to some chilly temperatures overnight, perhaps as low as -4 or -5 in some rural spots, and likely to see some mist and fog, particularly across the southeast of England into the early hours of Monday morning too. So a chilly but bright start for most across much of England and Wales. Further north, still a cloudier start. Outbreaks of rain gradually fizzling out across northern parts of England, and perhaps a bit of hazy sunshine across parts of Wales and central England. But otherwise, plenty of sunshine across the very far south again, and temperatures around about average for the time of year.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, welcome back. It's been a very serious show, so we're going to finish on some fun. Broadcasting legend Angela Rippon is hosting a National Day of Dance with the basic aim to get more people moving. So let's head straight to central London and speak to our reporter, Sophie Reaper.
Good afternoon to you, Dawn. Yes, we're here at a ballet class at the Royal School of Ballet. I'm just trying to partake, actually. Try and show you off a bit of my skills. There we are. And joining us are the fabulous Angela Rippon and Kai Widrington. Formidable partnership. We can't get Kai to stop. A formidable partnership on Strictly, and you're back on the dance floor now. Yes. Tell us why, Angela.
Well, because today is National Day of Dance, when we're trying to get everybody in the country to recognise that dance is certainly the best form of exercise you could can do. Not just me, not just him saying that.
You say everybody. Let's take a look at this fabulous class taking place behind us. All ages, all genders, everyone is here having a go. How important is it that everyone has a go on this day?
Everybody should have a go because it really is the best form of exercise you can do for your mind, for your body, for your health and your well-being, regardless of your age and regardless of your physicality. You might want to go to the gym, you might want to do a park run, all of those things are brilliant. But if you don't want to do that and you want to build your core, you want to build your balance so that you can go through life doing some form of exercise, as we've seen here this morning we saw people that were littlies that were 2.5. The oldest dancer we've got dancing today up in Harrogate, she's 96. Dance is an exercise you can do all your life, and we just want that message to get out to people. It's lovely to watch, yes, as an entertainment, these guys on Strictly, but it's a great exercise too. You can't get better.
Kai, this is what you do for a living. Some people might see you dancing and say, feel a little bit intimidated, but I know that's not what you would want, is it?
Definitely not. Definitely not. And let me tell you, ballet is definitely not my forte. I feel like the beginner in the class again. But like Angela said, it's not about being a professional dancer. It's not about being the best. It's about having a go, getting fit, keeping fit, and like Angela would say, investing in your well-being pension pot from cradle to grave. You can do it from as little as 2 years old all the way up until you're 80 plus. It doesn't matter. And we're here with there's old people, there's young people, there's us here. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're fit or unfit, you can start today.
We should say ability level as well. I know we've come from Pineapple Dance Studios, haven't we, where you were taking part in a ballroom class for people with visual impairments. What was that like?
Well, I think both of us were in awe of Diane and Chris in Strictly this year, which they won. And I mean, I kept saying to Kai, as a professional teacher, how do you teach someone to do that? So we went to the class today and we took part in it just to learn how to do a basic waltz. And so what we did, I closed my eyes for part of the class and was following. Kai closed his eyes so that we could get the feeling of spatial awareness, what it actually means. And I think there was a moment where, without knowing it, we both had our eyes closed.
Who's looking?
Who's doing what?
Well, on that note, we will leave it there. We'll let you guys get back to Swan Lake. Let's see those swan arms as you run away from us. There we are, very beautiful. That is the message today. People, get out there. To get out there and dance no matter what.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That's brilliant. If you want to get involved, please go to the website, which is letsdance.org.uk. Thank you very much, Sophie. OK, I've been Dawn Neeson, and this has been GB News. I just want to say a huge thank you to my panellists today, Jonathan Liss and Charlie Rowley. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you for your company on this Sunday afternoon. Sorry, it might have been a bit of a tough show, but it's been an important one to discuss, so I really appreciate your company. Whatever you do, please don't worry, though. We are here for you all the time at GB News, remember, and you can get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. So there is lots more coming up today. You've got the lovely Nana coming up at 3 o'clock. It's just up for me now to say, once again, thank you for your company. I said it's been a tough one, but please don't worry, we are here for you all the time. Thank you to my panel. Have a lovely rest of your Sunday. And don't remember, I'm back on breakfast tomorrow morning if you haven't had enough of me by then. But it keeps me out of trouble. Thank you for your company. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And before I leave you, I think the most important thing for you right now is the weather with Ellie. And here she is with the details. See you soon.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.